Hello.
Yeah, that's your name.
Squirrels got me.
Big Jim.
Yeah.
Really cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
That's good that you think that of it, because that's what deer hunting typically is cold and fun.
Yeah.
Yesterday morning, I'm glassing up on the pass and I see these deer moving, and I'm like, ooh, there's deer moving. All of a sudden, I just see this person just head down, just hauling ass, wearing shorts and a t-shirt with a pack on. And I'm like, is that Todd? My dad always talks about floating through the woods like the autumn breeze.
So Robert's
when you're
the
275 pounds, I don't know how you do that, but
the Freightliner. It's just like a creeper. You're just kind of up in the corner watching what's going on down there.
yeah.
You know.
He's like,
he's up there slapping, pissing all over everything.
is it warm yet?
How did you know the name of the actor?
That's right. I know.
Why did you say his name?
Hervé Villechaize. I can remember this.
Welcome to the Log Talk Podcast, brought to you by Pertnear Outdoors. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for tagging along here with Pertnear Outdoors and our Log Talk adventures. So, hope you all had a great weekend, as I know all of us did here. My entire gang and just about everybody in Western New York, I hope, enjoyed this awesome weather. It was truly one of those awesome spring weekends. So I hope you got out. I hope you kicked around in the woods or the farm fields looking for some sheds. I know it seemed like everybody that I was tracking along was out doing that, so it was definitely exciting to see some people finding some sheds. I myself had no luck. I know my brother, I think he found one or two, and Big Jim kind of stiffed me here. I was hoping to get him on tonight for the intro to this podcast so we could talk a little bit about his successes shed hunting, and I've found a few, and some of how we go about finding them. We are by no means professionals or that good at it, but hopefully, some of the things that we've done to kick across them we'd be able to share. So we'll be doing that in the next few weeks. We'll have Jimbo on to talk a little bit about that. He has a pretty good track record over the last few years of finding sheds, so we'll chat with him on that. But so I hope you had a good weekend there, everybody. And I know it was a busy one for myself. We had the outdoor show here in Western New York, the Travel and Sport Expo. So I was busy. I worked the booth a couple times for BHA, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and had some really awesome interaction with folks. Met some great people, saw some folks that I have met through social media but haven't had the chance to actually meet face-to-face, so it was good to shake hands and say hello. And if you did stop over to the booth, or if we did run into each other, appreciate your time and appreciate you following along with us here. So we did that, and kind of one of the things that we were talking quite a bit about is we have our Pint Night coming up here this upcoming Thursday, so the Thursday the 12th. I believe the date is, let me confirm that. Yes, Thursday the 12th. So check out either our social media pages or also BHA and some of the other. I know Hunters Creek, a couple of the guys over there, they posted on their page for me. Just trying to get the word out there. It sounds like we should have a pretty good turnout. There was quite a few people interested at the show, and folks that I know that are planning on being there. So it should be a good time, good get-together for everybody, just to get together. We're out the tail end of winter here, hopefully, so we can tell some hunting stories and start getting excited about the spring and chasing turkeys and getting out on the water and catching fish again. So hope to see you on Thursday night at Rusty Nickel Brewing Company. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send a message directly over to either our Pertnear pages or send over directly to one of us, and be happy to answer any of that. And if not, we will see you on Thursday. One of the other things, just wanted to kind of clarify what I'm up to. So if you've been following either along with me on my personal page or on the Pertnear Outdoors channel, I've been on a training program here since just about the first of the year. So every spring for the last 4 years, I've kind of gotten into trail running. So this is my training program to get me ready for the Muddy Sneaker, which is an annual race that they do usually like the third or fourth Saturday of April, and it's down at High Tor State Wildlife Management Area. So it's down at the south end of Canandaigua Lake, right up on the hills up above Naples. And it's a kind of a family tradition, something I've gotten into and I've caught the bug for, and really fallen in love with trail running. So that's something that I'm into that certainly Danny and Jimmy are not, but I really fall in love with this time of year, trying to get out and get my running going. And then all throughout the rest of the year, pretty much up through August, I'll be out running the trails and frequenting, especially Hunters Creek Park over here, right down the street from our house. So trail running's become a pretty big part of my life, and I really enjoy it quite a bit. And so if you see me out running and me posting this stuff, that's what that's all about. And met a few people at the show this weekend that also actually frequently run over at Hunters Creek, and I probably have ran by them before or passed them in the parking lot. So kind of a small world, a tight-knit little community once you get into it, to the trail running. And I'm mountain biking, a little bit different community. We don't necessarily cross paths all that much, except for literally on the paths. But trail running is a pretty unique group of people, and I think it's kind of interesting being a hunter and an outdoorsman, because a lot of the trail running circles are not that. So it's kind of interesting being out there running and wearing a camouflage shirt and going to some of these races and wearing a hunting branded T-shirt. Every once in a while, you run past somebody, or you'll be interacting with someone, and they see your shirt and they're interested, and it turns out they are too. But it's kind of two different worlds in a way, but something that, in kind of hope that maybe can bridge that gap a little bit to kind of open up the eyes to some of the people. There seems to be a lot of vegetarians or vegans that are into running, and I really feel that there's probably quite a few people out there like myself that are into running that are also into the outdoors and hunting, and it just gets you out there even more often. So just some thought there, a little info about myself and what I'm into with the running. And I was thinking at some point here about getting a podcast together with my Uncle Tim and my Uncle Chris. They're both the ones that got me into the running. They've been doing, my Uncle Chris got into running when he was in the Marines, did some competitive stuff with them in the Marine Corps. And when he came home, got into, doing some of these trail races. Actually started out with their first trail race, I believe, was the Muddy Sneaker 20 years ago. So it's a little bit of a family tradition, and we might try to put an episode together just to get their input and their thoughts on what that's been for their lives. So that is that. Kind of ran on there a little bit, but let's jump right into this week's episode. So I'm pretty excited to bring this conversation to you. This is going to be with my dad, Bill, and Todd Waldron. So many of you may have heard of Todd Waldron. If you have not, Todd also has a podcast of his own, and also I guess he has two podcasts now. So Todd has the East to West hunting podcast, and it's kind of based out of the Adirondacks here. And Todd's very active in backcountry hunters and anglers here in New York. He is the chapter chair, I do believe is his title. And he recently just started a new podcast under the Modern Carnivore umbrella called Outdoor Feast. So I wanted to get Todd on. Dad and I were up in Albany for a conference, so we found an opportunity to get in front of Todd and have a nice conversation. So I think it was a kind of a unique one. I wanted, my dad has become a fan of Todd's, and those two seem to have a lot in common. So I was excited to get them both in the same room, and we told some fun stories, talked about hunter recruitment and using food as a gateway to get people into the outdoors, and just a whole lot else. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Again, I appreciate you guys tagging along here and participating with us. And we definitely want to, like I've said before, we want to engage as much as possible. So if you're out there listening and there's something you'd like to hear, one of the things that gotten a little bit of feedback actually from one of my friends that has started recently listening, he wants to know a little bit more about the gear side of things that we're using, whether it be weapons or weapons was a thing that he brought up. What are we using for different rifles, shotguns, bows, things like that. So if that's something that'd be interesting to you, shoot us over a message and let us know, because we want to be putting content out there that everyone is enjoying and finds educational and informative. So please do so. And with that, I will let you go and enjoy this episode. Thank you and have a great week. Feed them.
Okay, that's cool though. I like this though because it's like I've never worked with clips, but
Yeah.
I like the idea that they're like you can just talk and it feels comfortable. It's not some bulky thing.
Yeah, the clips are nice, and I think this is, and I'm sure you've gone through it too, like just trying to get the system figured out. And I was just telling Dad, I like you have the setup with the headset, with the microphone, and that's nice if you're the guest too, because you can hear how everything's sounding. Like when I sat down with you, it was really nice to be able to listen to it on that side. But
Yeah,
But you don't need that stuff.
No.
You know, those are just kind of like it's cool to have,
yeah,
but
it's not necessary.
This stuff all works.
yeah, exactly.
I bought another one of those, so we have two because we were going to do a school bus podcast too.
We
Oh,
are
really?
we are going to do a
We
school
are
bus
going to.
podcast.
That's a good
So-
idea.
So we're just like, and I bought all these mics, but Billy, you know, he was off and running with his, and I just haven't had time. So at any rate, now we're seeing what's working. So I know I got to buy an amp.
Yep.
And then I'll buy another set of mics. And Billy's got the cables. They're just really long that came with this, but I don't care. I'll coil them up.
Yep.
So yeah, we're about to kick that off soon because nobody else. There was no trucking or school bus podcasts out there.
I was gonna say, like,
There's
that's
nothing.
the kind of thing that is such a niche,
And there's so
like
many.
that it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's
Yeah.
all the different like regulations that are very specific to those industries that a lot of people that don't get a chance to come up here to conferences and learn these things. And so I thought it'd be a good educational format, like for our group across the state. People are driving to work; they can listen to something on the FMCSA Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. Or
Think
something.
about the audience for that, the potential audience, because like when there's nothing else in that space,
Right.
like to be able to have a podcast like that, it's pretty much unlimited. I mean, there's thousands. You could have thousands and thousands of listeners. You know.
Yeah, it'd be huge.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got to get going on that. There's been life happened in between, so I had all. It's been.
That's always going to be a thing, though.
I know.
I've been listening, and it's been like a common thing that people have been saying lately in podcasts I've been listening to, where it's like you can talk and set goals all you want and talk like you're going to do something, but if you just have to do it. And the business manager from Naples, Mitch, I'll never forget it, and like it literally changed my mindset. We were talking about it was like 2 years ago. And we were doing a meeting at our dealership, and he was there doing a facility tour with them, and we got talking about trail running, and he's a big trail runner and like a legit like good trail runner. And I was telling him that my goal was to run a trail marathon, and he just like looked at me, he's like, I don't set goals, I just do things.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of took back and I'm like, oh, what a douche, Like,
Yeah.
that was kind of a rude thing to say, but then I stepped back and thought about it. I'm like, you know what? It's like, just do it.
Yeah.
Because you can set a goal. My goal in 2020 is to do this. It's like, no, like you need to set that goal, but you just need to do it. So people start asking you whether you're going to do something. Just freaking do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like, there's so many things. It's just like, just do it and figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
And just nothing's perfect.
If you wait for it to be perfect,
yeah.
it'll
Right.
never happen, right?
That's exactly. I think sometimes there's like this paralysis with like it's not quite the right time or it's not quite the right setup or I can't do it with this, but just got to do it.
Yeah.
Jump in.
And people like the realness of it because they know you're working through it and you're trying to figure it out. But
I remember when
think
we
so.
broke this equipment out. Remember, I bought the first set, and I think I was mowing, and you were there, and you wanted to get the. You wanted to,
there we go.
like you grab that thing out, and I'm like, here's the instruction book. Let's pay attention, And you're like throwing that, and you get these playing with it. By the time I get done mowing the lawn, I come back, you and your mother are sitting out there with a baby, and you're playing with that thing. You're like, okay, let's record a podcast.
Yeah,
I'm like,
You were ready to go.
that's why I got that, and I'm overwhelmed. I'm like working my way through the manual, and you're like, turn it on, go
Just
for
do
it.
absolutely. All right, we'll go ahead and get this thing officially rolling. So,
Oh, I thought we were rolling. This is
Well,
when most of our
it's-
podcasts go.
okay.
right, it is recording, but
Okay.
we'll officially start the conversation. So, I'm really excited today. This is something, and I guess I always start out like that. I'm always excited, but so today is a pretty cool day because I'm linking up here. So we got Todd Waldron and my father, Bill Harvey. We're sitting down, and this is my first time ever hanging out in a hotel room with a group of guys. So this is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
But,
different.
yeah. It's like, oh, hey, can I have a late checkout today? They're like, for what? I'm like, a podcast. That's funny. So Dad and I are up here for a conference for work. So that's kind of brought us up here, and Todd lives north of Albany. So him and I have been messaging back and forth about wanting to get together and do a podcast again and do one in person. So thanks, Todd, for making the journey down here and meeting with Dad and I. It's exciting to make the connection with you two for sure, because Dad really enjoys listening and interacting with your stuff that you post and what you're doing.
Love the podcast you always do.
Yeah.
I've listened to every single one.
Thanks, Bill.
I went back, I listened to every single one.
Well, I
Love it.
appreciate that, and it's always
Yeah.
good catching up with you, Billy. Like, we always have a lot to talk about, and I'm excited about the opportunity to come down and catch up. And Bill, it's
Yeah.
great to meet you in
Yeah,
person.
it's an honor to meet you as well. It's very-
Yeah.
feel like I know you, following along with everything up in Chestertown and your podcast. And
Yeah, thanks so
yeah,
much.
But it's good. You put out a lot of good content, and your knowledge base is extremely impressive to me. I'm thinking back to maybe a year ago this February, driving down here. I was listening to a podcast that you did that had to do with, I want to say like, and you'll correct me, but it had to do with like geology of New York State and the different lake basins. You had a fella on that was a specialist from one of the universities.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah. So Brian Bird is the interesting thing about Brian Bird.
Yeah. He's from up your way.
He's from up my way.
Yeah.
He lives in Whitehall, which is maybe 45 minutes from here. And he is like a Renaissance man. Like he works at the local meat shop.
That's
so
right.
He's like
I remember. Yeah.
He's a guy that when he was working on his geology degree, like his PhD at Western Michigan, he was butchering deer for this processor in Michigan, and they butchered something like 3,500 or 4,000 deer. And then he went on to have this really cool career. Like worked down at the museum, worked at Skidmore, and now he's back up at the meat. We were talking before we started podcasting about the big circle that hares and rabbits run.
Oh, hunting rabbits and going right back to your home range, right?
Same with all of us, right?
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. But such a different conversations you've done like that don't, they're not really like completely hunt focused. But there's I drove down this and I couldn't believe how much joy and knowledge. I was like, this is amazing stuff. It has nothing to do with hunting. It did it. So it was just the diversity of some of the content that you brought is very interesting to me.
I appreciate that.
Stuff, yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We're pumping you up hard here. So
Are you getting me ready for fall or something?
Yeah, exactly. So, but right before you got here, we were talking. You have a unique knack, and it's something that even me creating the intros for the podcast, it's really hard sitting there by yourself and having a narration or a dialogue with something. I find myself rushing to the finish.
Yep.
And it's oh my God, I didn't say what I wanted to say, then I redo it. But with you, how has that been for you? You do a lot solo, and especially lately you've been doing quite a few solo.
My wife would probably say that it's because I talk to myself so much that I just so long before podcasting. Yeah. I was driving all over the place in my car, for work on the road, and I guess I was probably just talking to myself a lot, But I think out loud and I appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely it wasn't editing is a wonderful thing, so it doesn't always come out the way on the front end that it might sound when it's worked out, but you definitely have to work at it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's definitely fun listening to you. So I wanted to read a message that my dad sent to me, and I had texted this to you last week when you were starting your journey out to Minnesota to Pheasant Fest. But I wanted to read this message because I think it's I think with you two, you both this would be a fun thing to dive into a little bit. So let me read this message that Dad sent me maybe 3-4 weeks ago. So here's an interesting perspective. As a father, I get to listen into your conversations as a third-party outsider. To hear you speak of how you feel about the time we spent together and the impact it had on you and the importance is quite a unique experience. Most fathers wouldn't get to hear that as a third-party listener. In some way, it takes what I already believed and what I already knew, and it just validates it at a higher level. I believe because of my absence in the room, but also because of the effortless draw of parallels between the experiences and the time we shared in the early years and your present-day passions and perspectives. In the end, in my end, that's all I can really hope to instill and leave behind as a legacy. The conversations cement my legacy and the legacy of other fathers and patriarchs that have done the same within their families. Never underestimate the significance of that. I love you. So that's really powerful. And
Yeah.
Had I been drinking?
it was early in the morning, so if you were getting after it, you were gonna have an all dayer. But
no, I just got thinking about just everything I said there. Yeah, so I'm like, I'm gonna share that with you.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't think of a cooler thing to say, or like a cooler perspective coming from a father about all that, Bill. I mean, that is,
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a cool thing to say, and it's such a great perspective, and yeah, it kind of chokes me up thinking about it.
It chokes me up. When I read that, I was down in my basement and working on something, and it was early in the morning. It was a Saturday, and it was unprovoked. We weren't even messaging or anything. All of a sudden, I look at my phone, and here's this message from Dad, and I'm like, I start reading it, and I'm like, oh my God! I'm like, this is, and it is, and that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about it with you two. Is that and that's what I'm finding about getting into doing this podcast and having some of these deeper conversations, sitting down with people, is that it's not just a passing. We're in such a world now where everything is, oh my God, I got to go do this, and I've opened my phone, I got to go do that. Whereas now, like, you're listening to things and hearing people and getting into their conversations and their lives and understanding where everyone's at, and it is creating, you and I keep talking about community, and a lot of things in this world that we're in, community is lost. And I don't know, I could just keep spewing things out of my mouth about this, but I love that, Dad, and it makes me feel good know that it makes you feel good, because I'm just being me, and I'm cut from your cloth, and you and mom too. Like, I would give her a lot of credit too, but I flipping it around. I'm sitting today in the general session at the conference. I work for a school bus dealership. Dad's a customer of mine, not of mine directly, but of our dealership, of the network, and listening to you stand up there and speak about the things that you're doing legislatively and actively within the organization and the state in pupil transportation and what you're doing. I was sitting there thinking about it, knowing that we were going to have this discussion today. It's just all of this is so unique. I don't think a lot of fathers, sons, mothers, daughters get to interact, and it all comes back around to, I think it's just the values that are instilled in the, we're very emotional. We're not emotional, but we're outward about how we're feeling, the things we're thinking. Like,
and sharing it with each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I sit there, and it's just, I talked, when you and I sat down and talked about the meat processing, how I was just full of pride to provide meat for my son and watch him eat. Like, I sit down there today, and I'm full of pride that that's my dad, and that you work so hard. But you get, to have people come up to me and say, your dad's amazing, just everything he does for this. Like, you very rarely in this world do you hear the positive things. It's always negative. So it was just...
Or you don't hear anything at all because you're not in the same circles. We're in a very unique situation.
Yeah.
Yep. Our hobbies parallel and our careers parallel, and so we cross paths a lot. So it's like, I hear wonderful things about you. But it's pretty cool.
It is.
We're very fortunate in that, because how many families where they go long periods of time without, like, even seeing their kids or their parents, much less doing so much together and communicating. That's the one thing about this podcasting thing, is it really, like, opens up the communication, and that's what I just never thought about when we got into it until I listened to some of your conversations, and it instills the thoughts that I shared in that message. That it does kind of validate you. You think back, next thing you know, in the blink of an eye, they were this big, and now they're, got their own families, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, it does validate it, right? And it's one thing to, like, know it intuitively and to maybe share it personally, but it's another thing, like, when you can get it out on the community channel, and then you're, like, listening to it, and then other people can, it's like all this. I think there's this essence of, like, when you hear that on the podcast, I think it hits home, and it makes it more real, and it just kind of sets the stage for, it really is important. And it's important to communicate it to our loved ones, to people that we share this stuff with. And it's really cool to hear it as well, when you're just listening to it after the fact. And to just, because I think people come in and they're like, yeah, Billy, that's great, because, like, I felt the same way. And, like, I haven't heard that. And I'm listening to your podcast, And it just like, it really struck me and it meant something to me to see that relationship that you have with your dad. I wish I had that relationship with my dad. You know, those kinds of stories that come out. It's impactful.
And the stories of people reaching out and saying, you know, and I'm sure you get this all the time too with your podcast, where people reaching out and just telling you like, oh, I related so well to that, or we do the same thing with our family. And it's like, I love that. You know, people message me. I got on our venison processing podcast, people sending me messages and, oh, we do something very similar. And a guy at the gym came up to me the other day, and Alex Doster, I'll give him a shout out. He, a very small gym. I live in a town of like, there's more cows than people, but so we all know each other. But he listens he listens to the podcast.
The amazing thing is they have a gym.
Is there like one treadmill, one weight bar?
Actually, like, it's a kick-ass little gym. It's a little more. It's a fairly new building, and the way I understand it, because I'm new to the area, but the guy that owns the gym used to own the big grain mill that's in town. And his family and himself, they sold it, and I could have this completely wrong, so this could just be fake news, like bad. But when they sold that, they built the gym, and we are extremely blessed in this little tiny town we have.
Yeah,
to have
it's
a gym,
small town.
Yeah.
Like 3 minutes from my house, I have a gym, you know.
It's pretty cool.
Other than that, I have to go 15, 20 minutes to get groceries. But, you know, I'm running on the treadmill Monday morning or Tuesday morning, and Alex comes up to me, and he's like, and I got my headphones in, and I'm like running hard, and I'm sweating, and he comes up to me, and he's like, something about like peppers and onions, and I'm like, what? He's like, so I take my earbud out, and I'm like, what's up? He goes, peppers and onions. He goes, there's a place in the city that we go and we buy pre-cut peppers and onions that are fresh. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, you know?
Hot tip.
It's hot tip.
Hot tip.
So he's like, I'll get you the name of the place. You have to be, you know, like somebody he knows has a restaurant, so they can go to this place and get this bulk stuff. But it's like, you know, you just make these connections with people.
Yeah.
Like, I freaking love it. Like,
and you never know where somebody's going to just show up and be like, hey, I like that.
Right.
You know, or give you a tip. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's really fun. It's a fun thing to be doing, and it's a fun way to, I don't know. I think in this world, you gotta have those, find a way to have those deeper level conversations with people, and, you know, tell your family you love them, tell your people around you that you appreciate them,
and I think that's a cool thing with there's a lot of podcasting going on, but you know, the multi-generational thing's a little bit different, perhaps with us.
Yeah.
You know, just within the family, you know, there's as far as family unit, like podcasting thing. And I just hope that, because like you say, you hear that people go, something really strikes a note with them that they heard, whether it's a practice, something we're doing, or a way we hunt, or the things we do, or you know, maybe even feelings, right? Like, and I think that there's a value to getting those feelings out, and you know, it's very rewarding, and if like somebody's inspired to maybe go share with their dad, or share with their son or daughter, the type of things like that we're sharing, like, because there's a lot, like my father and I am a great hunting buddy. We never had like deep conversation about how much I appreciate him getting me going in the out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's I feel very fortunate to be able to, you know, openly share that with you boys, and to even be thinking along those lines, that's an important messaging. But then also, you know, hopeful that perhaps other listeners are inspired to share, you know, with their family members. And it doesn't have to be a son or a dad; it can be brothers, you know, cousins and uncle that took you out,
a friend,
absolutely,
you know, a friend.
Neighbor,
yeah. And I don't know, and I guess I would throw this to both of you guys too, is, you know, when we, like on this last Western hunt we went on this fall, you know, there was, you know, we all know about the situation that Danny had with the blood clot in his shoulder, which we had no idea that's what it was, but we knew he was hurting. And Brian had been battling some health issues during the summer, like serious health issues. So for him to even be on that hunt was incredible. And so there was just a lot going on. And coming out of the mountains, you know, that hike out from camp to the truck, kind of unexpected leaving with everything on our backs. You know, it was a hard hike out. It was middle of the day. It was hot. And we were all just totally beat. But I mean, I don't know, I get like this. Like, I was like physically emotional and proud of Danny and proud of Brian. You know, like, I went up to both of them, and I don't know if they looked at it the same way, but I went up to them both and I, put my arm around them. I'm like, I'm proud of you. Like, way to go getting out of there. Cause that was freaking hell, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loaded up, I carried a little extra, stuff that was just random stuff just to help. And cause they were both in, Danny's got a blood clot and Brian's hurting, and it's like, but you bond together. And I guess I'd pass it to both of you guys. Like, that's one of the things that's cool about doing hard stuff. And I think getting out in the outdoors and doing things, it does. It like creates a bond with the people that you're doing that with.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's challenging.
Oh, yeah, the adversity, right? I think that there's I don't know what it is about adversity that can bond people together, but it doesn't even have to be outdoor related. You talk to people in a whole lot of different communities, where they go through hardships, and it could be something like a hard program at a university, or it could be like a hunting trip, or it could be who knows what, a running, like people that have a running club that finish a marathon together, or on and on. But like when you experience that with somebody or a group of people, like you bond with that because you know what the price was for that, because there's a price for everything, and you know what it took to get there, I think, and those kinds of experiences will make a mark.
Yeah, stuff to hold on to long term.
For sure,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about that?
About what?
That's all I got to say about that. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. So, Todd, you've got a bunch of stuff going on. And so I guess let's first talk about Modern Carnivore and Outdoor Feast. Because then that'll kind of dovetail into Pheasant Fest and your little adventure you just went on with that. I want to talk a little bit about. But
sure.
So how is you did your podcast, the East to West Hunting Podcast. You did that, and are you going to continue to keep doing that even with doing the Outdoor Feast? Or
yeah, thanks. So I'll just say that first, I'm thrilled. I appreciate for everybody that's supported me through the East to West Hunting Podcast. I can't thank the community enough, because like what's made that are the guests in the community, and like trying to just like share their story. So I just feel like I've always tried to be a conduit, and just like how can we get their stories out, because that's what's special about it, and that's what is going to move the conversation forward. Is getting average people that are doing amazing things to tell their stories. And so that's always been great, and it was really important to me. And so I ended up last year, without getting into a heavy amount of detail about why I'm with Mod Carn, but I did an event in New York City with Mark at Modern Carnivore last year, wild food event, and we just really clicked. And I've known him for a few years, but he's one of these friends that you start talking and you're like, wow, there's so many parallels. You're doing this, and I consider him a mentor. Like I feel like he's ahead of his game. It's like to where I am on a lot of things, like in his background with production and just like the mentoring programs and everything. And I feel like I can help him with like the consistency with like the podcasting and getting a whole bunch of stuff done in the, whatever you want to call that, like the prolificness of being able to have conversations and build on that. So I felt like it was a good fit. And so went to Pheasant Fest this weekend in Minneapolis to roll that whole thing out. And it was an amazing experience. I'm going to say something, for people outside of the Midwest that might not be familiar with Pheasants Forever, they are a great conservation group that was not on my radar up until I went out there. But they're doing some great work with habitat and R3, which is like the hunter recruitment side. And they also were really smart enough to not only just be this about pheasants, but like they were bringing backcountry hunters and anglers, Rough Grouse Society, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. Randy Newberg gave the presentation.
It was quite a crew that were there. We were watching along on social media.
32,000 people in Minneapolis over the weekend. Yeah. And it was the biggest banquet I've ever seen in my life. There were like 1,200 people in the banquet room for dinner. And so I'm just going to say I think they have it going with their foresight to like bring people to the table, because I think that's how we make progress.
That's how you get things done, right?
Yeah, it's like we got to work together. So that was pretty cool. And so reaching, we launched Outdoor Feast, and that's a Modern Carnivore channel. And so that's going to be on the Modern Carnivore website. It's going to be through their social. And with Outdoor Feast, like what we're really trying to do is like amplify Modern Carnivores program for being an accessible community for people who are adults who want to get started, to just give them a gateway to say, hey, regardless of your background, whether you're 30, 60, man, woman, urban, rural, you're welcome here. If you want to start to learn how to hunt or fish or forage, you can do it. And so so that's that with Outdoor Feast. And then with East to West, like that's going to stay out there on the platforms and everything. Mm-hmm. And like what I envision with that is like I probably won't be podcasting there every week, but like I can envision having those kinds of conversations, like my friend with Brian Bird about geology. And so it's going to be more about conservation. It's maybe some Western stuff, but pulling the mentorship stuff over to Mod Carn, because I think that's where it's like its highest and best use is. Yeah. And that's what the plan is. So they'll be kind of like separate podcasts, but they'll complement each other. So yeah.
Nice.
So so I'm about, I don't know, 6 months into this podcasting journey, and it's a lot of work. It's a commitment. And you and I don't think when we first sat down, we met up in Saratoga there during the summer and did our first podcast together, I don't think we ever really got into discussing. I mean, what was the jumping point for you? I know we talked about, what was your motivation getting into backcountry hunters and anglers and stuff like that. But what was your motivation for getting started doing podcasting
in the first place?
In the first place,
with East to West.
Yeah, in the first place. And then, how was it for you as you were getting started? What were some of the? Because you never hear anybody talk about this. Like,
no.
And it's like you want to see people listening. Like you want to see that you're reaching people.
Yeah. You want to see numbers.
But you also have this thing, and this is what's tearing at us at Pertnear Outdoors is like we want to keep it organic. We want to keep it original. We don't want to be like dumping tons of money at advertising. Like you can do that, but that's not who we are. Like we want to be genuine. We want to share realness, and if people want to follow, not like push it in front of people. So
not just another channel, not just another platform.
Because there's a lot of
that
them
stuff out there. Right.
Yep. So I guess that's where I kind of like to pick your brain on that.
So it's a deep question, and there's a lot to unpack there. But I'm going to say what kind of precipitated the podcasting was after the first Western trip that my friend Jeff Jones and I did in 2016. We thought, hey, we should set up this WordPress website and just start blogging about our trip, because I think that it was one of those things. You know how we were talking about goal setting and just doing things. Yeah. Well, I was the kind of person that when I was in my 20s and I was working in Pennsylvania, I knew that I wanted to go to Colorado to hunt elk, okay? And it took me 20 years to get to that point. I was that kind of person. Yeah. Not because I didn't want to go, but just because of life and family and barriers and just not knowing and not having somebody to go with. And when we went in 2016, we had this incredible time. It was public land DIY hunt. We've talked about it. Don't need to get too into that. But what it did is it was one of those eye openers. Like, hey, we can do this stuff. If you really want to do this stuff, if this stuff is important to you, do it. Don't wait. And so I really started out like just blogging that about the trip. And then I guess from there, I kind of had this epiphany that I felt like, okay, a podcast can maybe broaden that conversation. I felt, for one, that there was maybe a space here in the Northeast, because they're by default, a lot of those podcasts are like Western and Midwestern focused. Sure. And there just wasn't, there's some podcasts out there like, Adventurous Gentleman, Will Bradley had one up, and he's based in like Utica. But there wasn't anything like up in the Adirondacks and up in the Northeast, like New England, that I was familiar with. I'm sure there are, but I just wasn't aware of it. Circles, And so I felt like, okay, like I think we can get the message out, because I think it's easier for people to listen to podcasts than it is to read blogs. I think just by human nature, right?
You're more likely to get your message.
Yeah, so I thought that it could be expanded. I thought it could be leveraged more, quite frankly. Like you can just get a podcast out there, and like you're just going to reach more numbers. And I've never been driven by the commercialization of getting numbers out there, but I have this passion and I have this belief that the people that I ask on the podcast, I believe in them, and I believe in their stories, and I believe they've got the right message, and I believe in that message, and that's bigger than me. And that's why I want to amplify it. That's what drives me to have those conversations and to get it out there. Yeah, it's like it's about getting the word out and believing in that is the path to our future. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what pushed it for a while. And then, boy, you know, I'll tell you, like, there's been so many times, like, getting started with the podcast where it's like, you don't know where this is going to go. You go through, talk about adversity, and you know, we're talking about adversity with hunting, but I can talk a lot about adversity with podcasting and just not knowing what I'm doing, and like getting started with the technical aspects of podcasting, and getting started with all the content and all the behind the scenes work that goes into it that you don't see when you're just listening to your great podcast, but you know it, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So there was just this, you know, there were ups and downs, and I lost a couple episodes just because of just learning, trial and error, like that didn't sound the way I wanted to, and all of that stuff, you know.
You got me paranoid now.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
so I'm sorry. Like, I don't mean to take this down a negative rabbit hole or anything. I'm just talking about.
Just like, holy shit! I hope I hit that button.
Yeah. So like, I'm just like, I do this too, right? So same thing, and so like, I don't know. Like you go through that adversity, but it's just I believed in it. Like, I believed in the people I wanted to talk to, and so I just push, and like the one thing I've learned over time with like the number of episodes is just that I became more relaxed with the idea that if not every single episode has to be, like, everyone's unique in its own way, and there's a reason you want to talk to that person, and the authenticity is what is important. And I think there's a renaissance for people with authenticity for what Pertnear Outdoors is doing. Like, we're talking about the big commercial podcasts, and those are great, but there's only a handful of those. And I'm going to say that of the 12 million people out there that drive conservation funding and hunting, and that we depend on to be mentors for the next run, there's very few that are celebrities, okay? And I know they have a big share of the voice because that's how the commercial part of it works, but it depends on average people. And I think that most people that I talk to have a yearning to hear authenticity. Like, they can sift through the BS.
Yeah,
and it's
I
not
agree.
saying that it's BS, but like, they can sift through the, you know, what's being pitched at them, right? So they'll go toward that authenticity, and they'll go toward those stories. And that's my advice. Keep going, and as you go further, you'll just relax a little bit. If, like, I just learned that, like, with episodes, not every episode has to be the best episode you ever put out. It's consistency, you know?
Yeah, I feel that. Like,
yeah,
is this good? Is this going to keep people engaged? And it's like I feel that pressure right now, but you know, we're young in this. I mean, I'm 33 episodes in total, so
you're crushing it though. I mean, your consistency is great. You're having good guests on. Like, you're one of the best episodes. I can tell you one thing, like our Western hunting episode that we did on my podcast is up there in like the top probably 10.
The one that you and I did?
Yeah. The first one we did, as far as downloads. Mm-hmm. Yep. So there's a market for that.
There is, yeah. And it's related to it. I don't know. It's so hard. And there's Jimmy and Danny and I talk about all the time, and we're trying to get on a routine of having it might sound corny, but we're all doing so much that we need to have a monthly conference call to just make sure that we're all on the same page and keeping ourselves grounded to what we're really trying to do, and not losing focus, because it's so easy to see this over here and it's like, ooh, I want to be one of those guys, or I want to do that. And it's like, yeah, I if we ever get to that level, that's great, but that's not why we started this. Like,
and you also don't want what you're doing to run away with you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, there's balance. I mean, you and I have talked about that. You have to maintain the balance. Yeah. And what's really important, because like I told you, don't feel pressured to kick out a podcast weekly. You know, as time goes on, right, that can be a hardship. So it's tough, because once you establish a baseline of your consistency, then people begin to look for that. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing either, but you have to be careful what norm you establish, and then your ability to maintain that norm. Yeah. And then to have this fun thing that we're doing become something that's leading you around, or it's steering you instead of you steering it. So I think back to when you kids were little, and we used to, we had the DVDs and the hunting stuff, and we're always watching. We're like, we could have our own hunting show. It would be called Just Hunting. Yeah. And we would just be doing this right here.
I love that.
It's just like, this is what it is. We didn't get anything this weekend, but remember we used to joke about that, and that's kind of what the flavor of the podcast. Is just like this is just it,
Yeah, it's remembering the why.
Yeah,
like you're doing
exactly.
this. You've got a great platform going. People like it. It's authentic, and it's just staying true to that and remembering why you're doing it, and like staying true to that authenticity. Billy will keep it moving. It's cool stuff. You're doing good stuff.
Oh, I appreciate it. And trust me, I'm not fishing for that at all.
No.
But it's cool to have the support from you, and obviously, like Dad and I, we talk, and it's just created all, like him and I are talking all the time now. It's like, hey, did you listen to this? Or did you listen to this? Hey, great job on that. Like, it's just fun. It's engaging. But you've been very supportive, Todd, and I appreciate that. And I wouldn't have known what to buy or what hosting service to use. I remember sitting in the coffee shop. I'm like, Todd, can you talk for a minute? I'm trying to figure out this lips and shit.
I'm talking to Bill. It's like, what should we get? It's like, I talked to Todd. Todd said we had to get XYZ. So I'm on Amazon ordering this stuff.
So on the outdoor feast, so I listened to I guess you had like a preview episode, because you've had a few episodes posted already, but officially like 2 episodes have posted, right?
Yeah. So what happened is, this is kind of funny, but like I've got a bunch recorded that I can't wait to get out. But heading out to Pheasant Fest, I wanted to get at least one up, and so I did a one called Rooted in Vermont. It's a great locavore program, and I think they're doing an amazing job of getting hunters and anglers into that conversation. So, which is like awesome in the sense that so many times you think of the farm to plate network, and it's like farmers markets and CSAs and stuff, but there's missing the piece of the hunters and anglers and how that comes into it. And Rooted in Vermont is actually doing that, and so I wanted to talk to them. So we got that out there. But then, like, the whole purpose of going out to Pheasant Fest was to launch the podcast. So when we recorded with Lantani and Jamie Carlson out there, we thought it would be cool to just kind of backtrack and rearrange that a little bit so that, the introduction to Outdoor Feast was at the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers booth in Pheasant Fest with those folks. And then we renumbered Rooted in Vermont to number 2.
So I was in so early that I know there was some stuff going on.
So what I'm saying is I got ahead of myself.
I got my eye on you, Todd Waldron.
I got ahead of myself, and my friend Mark said, hey, wait a minute. This is the first podcast episode.
That's awesome. That's too funny. But I definitely enjoyed. I have not listened to you posted another one, or was that so the one that I saw that's number 2 is actually
the one that you saw that's number 2 was
that's the one that
was the original number 1.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
But it was, so what was that like sitting down with Land? I mean, he's a big name out there, and everybody knows him from BHA. And so what has that been like, interacting and working with him?
So Land is a good friend, and I've known him for several years, and the thing about Lantani that I respect the most is his authenticity and his ability to speak up and say what needs to be said. And he won't waver from that or deviate from it. And so I first met him in Missoula. I went to the National Rendezvous in Missoula in 2016. He was the second person that came up to me and said hello. The first was Tim Brass. I went there by myself. I didn't know anybody. I'm in the Holiday Inn in Missoula, and Tim Brass comes down and says, welcome. And I explained I'm from New York, and who walks over but Lantani. And he pats me on the back. He's like, that's awesome. I can't believe you came from New York. I also have been in Washington with Land on a trip advocating for Land and Water Conservation Fund. So I've been around him a little bit, but I'm not saying that in a way that I'm name dropping or saying that he's my best friend or anything like that. But I've been around him enough to know that I respect the hell out of him, and he's somebody that I'm proud to call a friend. And so to be able to, have a conversation with him on a podcast means a lot to me. And he's just somebody that he believes in his mission. He believes in the people. He's thankful for the volunteers that he's got, and he treats people well, in my opinion. So he sees that his role is an amplifier. He's kind of like us, but on a way bigger scale. And so, anytime you sit down with Lantani, I'm thankful for it. I'm always interested in his opinion because he's a great communicator. And I always know where he stands, because if he likes something, he'll tell you. If he doesn't like something, he'll tell you, and you just know where he's at. There's no blowing smoke. You'll know. And
it's good quality.
Yeah. So like with him, that was cool. He happened to be there as part of a larger forum. So Whit Fosberg from TRCP, Ben Jones from the Rough Grouse Society. I don't want to miss anybody else, but Howard Vincent, all these folks that are doing great work. They were all up there with like in the Public Lands Forum talking about how to work together. So that was why he was there. But he was there also because Pheasants Forever had the vision to invite all those partners. You know, that Pheasant Fest wasn't about BHA, but they invited him, you know, and that says a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, backing up a little bit earlier in our conversation, you had mentioned that you didn't have a lot of familiarity with like the Pheasants Forever. Now, have you had any exposure to them out here in Eastern New York? So like local organizations out here? Or?
So here's great, Bill. So like the only thing I knew about pheasants was like one of those tongue twisters that I read in a travel book once from Rick Steves. You know, tongue twisters like you know, Peter Piper. Well, I read one that said, I'm a mother pheasant plucker. I pluck mother pheasants. I'm the most pleasant mother pheasant plucker that's ever plucked a mother pheasant. So that was my game going into Pheasant Fest. That's all I knew.
That's all you had, right?
Right. So
not a whole lot of pheasants wandering around the Adirondack
So
State
Park. I did not grow up pheasant hunting in the Adirondacks just because the habitat is like
not there.
And I had a little bit of exposure to pheasants when I was working in Pennsylvania because they have a good pheasant program down there. They have a big farm down north of Williamsport in Trout Run. And then also got some exposure over in New England at a veterans program that New England Adventures put on recently. So, you know, I just didn't know a lot about what Pheasants Forever was doing because I just didn't have exposure to it. But then I got to meet Kurt Bond, who is in Pennsylvania, and he works up in Western New York as well. He's like their regional manager
for Pheasants
Forever. And they've got some good groups. They've got some stuff going on.
There was a group, and I can't remember the guy's name, but this going back probably late 80s, early 90s, but a local, we didn't have that for, but the Pheasants Forever got going in the Monroe County area in South. I don't know, but there was a guy, it goes way back, I think it was like Bernie Verhagen was his name, but somehow I knew him through the school bus business, and the Pheasants Forever, that was the first I had heard of it. And I didn't know if it really, I think it was still like in place and intact in Western New York, which the habitat's quite a bit different and it's more maybe suitable, right? So there's more ringnecks out that way. And,
yeah, totally.
But I was really hasn't been an organization that's been on my radar that I see out there a lot, but then just following along, you know, on Instagram with what the Pheasant Fest out there was just like, wow, this is a big program.
I had no idea. So, I mean, and the thing is too, is like you go out there in the Midwest and people love pheasant hunting and it's like a great gateway for hunter recruitment. And it's a great gateway. Like the women's community around pheasant hunting was incredible. Marissa Jensen from Nebraska is Pheasants Forever's education and outreach person, and she's been all over. Like if you go to Project Upland, which is like run by I think it's like AJ DeRosa, Northwoods Collective or whatever it is. Project Upland, like she's been like on videos and stuff with that. There's just something about that whole experience that it is a draw for new hunters, and it's the experience of working with dogs, you know, and whether you have dogs or not, you know, finding somebody that does, going out there. It's a gateway for women to get into it. And wow, I mean,
well, it's 30, like a family activity, a group activity. We do, you know, as a kid, we had so many pheasants on our farm as a kid that opening day of pheasant season was bigger than opening day of deer season.
Is that right?
People would come out of the city and we didn't have our farm posted, and I can remember the bus would have trouble getting down our country road to get to our house on opening day of pheasant, and there's like guys shooting it, but you know, you'd limit out with 2. And the guys would show up in their car, and you know, an hour later they were gone. They had their 2 birds, but there was pheasants everywhere.
They were everywhere
in the 70s. And my father would get home from work, and we didn't have a bird dog, but we had a French poodle. That if you put him on a rope, he'd range in front of you and put the birds up. But my father would. It was 4 boys, and my father would walk down the center of alfalfa field, and we had 2 boys on each side, and the poodle ranging in front on a rope.
That's hilarious.
That is great.
And we'd be back before my mother had dinner ready with 2 birds. So, yeah,
I love that story, Bill.
Is that a real story?
That's a real. And that son of a gun got off the rope a couple times, and we chased him all the way over to.
Oh my God!
All the way over to Clay Street. The whole family was out there. My sister, my mother, everybody was out chasing the darn dog around.
Oh, that's great.
A French poodle.
Yeah, he was howling on birds, but you didn't want him to get away from you. You'd never catch it. He got off with the rope. We had a heck of a time getting him.
Oh my God!
Chased him all over the neighbors' farms everywhere. But yeah, the pheasant hunting was unbelievable around my area growing up, and we had so many pheasants that I can remember the DEC would come in, and they got permission more from the neighbor's farm than ours. We were more kidney beans and corns and some grains and things like that. But across the street there was a lot of the one farmer had quite a bit of hay fields. He had sheep there on his farm. But the DEC would come in, and I just, as a kid, I got the biggest kick out of watching this. But they had these machines that were like ATVs. They were probably like Argos, because back then they didn't have ATVs, with lights and booms and cannons, and they would shoot the nets off. But they would come in there and actually capture pheasants to take away, to move, like for a relocation program to establish populations in other areas. So, I didn't, I was a kid or a middle school, high schooler, but I used to, talk to those guys and got a kick out. They'd line right up in front of our house, and they'd go out with these machines, and
that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah. And then to staying active as a hunter and being on that farm forever, and then still living in the area and having the pheasants like go away. You know what I mean? That I was there when there was so many. The DEC would come and trap them and use them for restocking other regions, and then to see it go away.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was agricultural practices. So you talk about conservation and witnessing the effects of that, with the elimination of hedgerows and protection areas as these fields became bigger and we took out fence rows and
the habitat.
Well, all of a sudden the habitat's gone.
Yeah.
And you'd be hunting in a swamp and you see a pheasant go by. You're like, well, that's odd.
Yeah. But that's where
all
they
had.
Yeah.
And that, when we. So I had Brian Gottfried on, and he wanted me to tell you, said hello. I was talking to him earlier today, and he was telling us that NWTF, one of their key sources for repopulating the wild turkey was coming out of Allegheny State Forest. I had no idea. So that's when
you mean years ago?
Years ago.
Yeah.
When they were trapping them out of there, and now Brian said that's one of the areas that they're hurting the most, and it's all habitat.
It's all habitat.
And that's so much of this. You talk about. At Pheasant Fest having all a lot of different organizations there. At the end of the day, it all comes back to habitat, and everybody's talking about the same stuff. And it's if you can combine forces. So when a QDMA guy is doing some timber stand improvement, he's also thinking about how is this going to affect the rabbits and the and upland birds and all this different stuff. Like just thinking about that, how it affects the whole ecosystem, not just that one buck that you're trying to kill or that one turkey that you're going after.
I think that's a neat thing, like with what we do with our property. Remember, I was in that program and we made the brush piles. So there's a place for grouse and rabbits and squirrels and turkeys and thickening, right, and increasing stem density. And, we're seeing more turkeys, on the property. We're seeing more deer. So it's affecting all those other species as well. And I think back to when I was a kid, the very first time I ever went turkey hunting was at Allegheny State Park. And the guys were talking this is back in mid-70s, probably 75 or so. And my father and Bob and Jim, the guys were talking about, there's some guys are hunting turkeys now. We got to give that a try, So we went and my father bought a slate call and took some of us boys and we went down. We rented a cabin down and there's a lake down there. I don't know if it's I want to say Redfield or something like that.
Red House
Lake.
Yeah.
So we rented a cabin there, and my first turkey hunts were out like marching around because there was no turkeys farther north. And then I remember as time went on, somebody's like, "Hey, I was deer hunting down Klipnaki State Forest in Allegheny County. I saw a turkey." So next thing you know, we're moving as the turkeys move. We moved, and we were hunting in Allegheny, southern Allegheny County. And then everybody was like, I saw some up by Rattlesnake Hill, So then we moved to Ashen, Livingston County. We hunted there.
Next thing you know, watching that range expand,
it was cool, yeah.
It is pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we've done that with black bear.
Yeah.
We've done that with
the
turkey, and then we saw the pheasant go the other way. So it's interesting to watch.
It is, and I just think it's just becoming more conscious of that. I think that's what the big message is now that everybody's trying to get out there one way or another is just be aware is more than anything, an awareness of what's going on. I see the family farm, my wife's family farm, they just sold a bunch of the land. My father-in-law retired, so they sold a lot of the farmable land. And first thing
that's called tillable, Willie.
Tillable land,
right.
Farmable. You could farm anything, right?
That's right. That's tillable.
Yeah, tillable land. Excuse me. I'm just a freaking salesman, all right? For God's sakes. So first thing they did, they came in and they took the hedgerows out, and just simply so that they could have contiguous fields. I get it, but those hedgerows were travel corridors. They were.
Yeah.
It was a shocker for me. It's like, it's not. I didn't grow up there, but I watched like Brian in Dallas. You know, it was like all of a sudden there's a text message group going on. Holy shit! You see what they did? You know, like we kind of knew that they were probably going to do some of that. It's their land now. They've got thousands of head of cows that they got to feed. We get it, but it's like you see it and it's like, oh my God, like that just changed the landscape.
Well, that's the interesting thing, the different lens that you look at that through, right? Because the farmer's going, you know, right away moves in with an excavator, dozer. Let's clear out those hedgerows and we'll spread this out. And, you know, and who knows, maybe they're going to like strip crop that, you know, based on elevation to control erosion. And or maybe they just want a big field, right? That's more efficient. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the sportsman's looking at that going, oh my God, no, there goes the fence rows. And so it's interesting. Like a friend of mine was, he had a farm down in, still does, down in Ashen area, southern Dansville. But he would tell me, come down there, you know, you want to come hunt turkey? Hunt turkey, kill every one of them. You know, deer, kill them all, you know. Yep. But that's like the old time farmer mentality, that they're no good, get them out here, they eat my corn, you know.
Yep.
So, and you know, the Kirsches are farmers and they enjoy the outdoors and managing for their deer. And so it's interesting though, but it's all the lens. Like they come in and they don't see a fence row and wildlife habitat. They see obstruction to, you know, profitability.
Yeah.
It's a business.
That's such a good point, Bill. And I think that recognizing that is the first step in moving forward. Like recognizing that there's a lot of different lenses to look at things. Right. And then like once you get to that point where it's like there's different perspectives, then you can get to the point of like having those perspectives around and putting solutions somewhere in the middle.
How do we bring that together?
Right. Because like if we're not thinking that, if we're thinking like our perspective is the only perspective, then we're working in a silo, or right. You know, and we're not going to get things done.
We're not going to go
I think
anywhere.
Solutions, conservation solutions require partners. Partners need to be farmers. Partners need to be, it needs to make economic sense. People need to eat.
Timber,
you know?
timber folks.
And I know you've talked quite a bit about this, about, you know, you're a BHA guy, but private land is just as important. And that was something you and I talked about the first time we podcasted together was, you know, not from the hunting end of it, but from the land management perspective, that marriage between the two is so incredibly important to the private landowners. There's a lot more private land than there is public land. So there's got to be some of those conversations going on there. You know, you can't be a BHA guy and only live in your world. You have to understand that property line right there on the other side of it, those deer live there too, or those turkeys live there too. It's not just you know, here's my line, everything lives over here. It's not how it works.
You know, it was interesting. We got into some programs where, you know, we enrolled in programs where we did certain things with our property and we were compensated from the government for that, right? And that's where, you know, to create habitat. And so, you know, we're not in those anymore, but there's a lot of those programs out there, and we did participate in them a little bit. And the whole idea is to impact that private landowner. Because and to educate them too, because they'll have seminars and meetings where you can hear about the different programs they have, and you can, you know, have your tax liabilities reduced on your property if you agree to do XYZ in the name of conservation, right? And, you know, even like our logging roads, you know, I had, you know, seeding the roads and making sure that we had water bars and that our degrees of pitch were such. So I mean, we did a lot of work and seeded the roads, and you know, I was compensated for that, but. You know, I never would have done that, but I turned around and hired, you know, Corey, our neighbor, to come in with his dozer and put a man in there for a day and a half, and, you know, and get everything set the way it ought to be set, and then seed them, and then I was compensated, and I compensated him. So it's amazing. It is important not to leave out that private landowner and what they can do in the name of conservation.
And the reality is here in the East, it's just the landscape is dominated by private lands, right? So like in New York here. I'll just say forest land. This isn't like, I think there's something like 17 million acres of forest land in New York, and so we have maybe 3 million acres of state forest. I mean, we have something like maybe 3 million acres of forest preserve, plus another 700,000 acres of state forests and WMAs and stuff. But where's that leave the balance? That leaves the balance in families, private hands.
Yeah.
And so being able to communicate to them in a way that they get, and being respectful of their perspective, I think, is important. And just like you say, Bill, I mean, like having the outreach to even know that those programs even exist.
Right.
Because I think a lot of folks are just like, hey, I've got my woodlot, and as part of my family, like my family, for instance, we have a 46-acre woodlot in North Creek, but like I don't recall like growing up that we knew that there were stewardship programs out there, that there was a thing called 480A, or that there was these equip programs,
That's what we got into, with some equip.
Yeah, so like all these resources and why it's relevant, Yeah.
And Jim Simpson turned us onto it, and then we have a neighbor in Naples, a fellow that lives next door, is a forest consultant, and so he had advised us on a lot. But if you don't have somebody bending your ear about what's available, it's very possible that you own a woodlot and you're kind of very isolated with your thoughts, and you don't even realize what programs might be out there. So the outreach is important for the private landowners to contact them and bring them on board.
Yeah, most definitely.
And that's something that I've got Corey on the hook. Corey Figueredo is his name. So he said he's super busy right now. I've been messaging with him. So he said hit me up in April and we'll try to get together when things slow down a little bit. So that'd be cool to get someone from his side of things that's actually physically working with landowners and on the ground doing work.
He works on it's private land. That's what he works on.
Yeah, and also working habitat. And he's just a cool dude to sit down and talk to, because I'm telling him about an area that I'm hunting, and he's like, "Oh, I've walked that property," and I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yep, I've walked it. I've seen this." It's like, well, okay. So what else do you know, buddy? Where are you seeing the buckcrumbs or whatever? But, yeah, it's cool for sure. So one of the last things I had is things I wanted to talk about, and then we can anything else you guys want to hit on. But Dad loved your Little Buck podcast, so I wanted to bring that up because Dad's one of the finest little buck and big buck killers I know. So he doesn't discriminate between the two. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And Dad, I'll kind of start off with you. Like, I've seen you, and you talked a little bit about it on that last podcast. We weren't talking about hunting so much as we were talking about meat processing, but your journey as a hunter, where you were through your teens and in your 20s, you were building up, and then you had a run where you shot 8-10 good bucks that are on the wall, and then your focus changed, and then it became more than just that. And so I just kind of let you.
I remember, years ago I read in Deer and Deer Hunting magazine about the life cycle of a hunter, of the whitetail hunter, right? And all the different phases you go through. And I probably read that when I was in the second or third phase, right? So now I'm like in the fourth or fifth phase. But yeah, it was. I've never been a trophy hunter, right? I haven't, and I always tell people I shoot the littlest bucks and I'll shoot the biggest bucks. In the moment, I decide what I want.
And the littlest does. My God, you shoot a lot of little does.
It's deer hunting.
I do too.
It had big ears.
So Todd, this is the way I explain it. When you go squirrel hunting and you see a squirrel hopping tree to tree, you don't look at it and go, "That's this year's squirrel. That's a little one."
I've never heard anybody field judge a squirrel. I mean, unless it's that guy Kevin Murphy from Kentucky.
Yeah, Kevin probably would.
Yeah, we met him.
Really?
Yeah, we went to the
we
live.
met him in Ohio.
We went to the live recording of the Meat Eater, and he was such a cool dude. We sat there and chatted with him for a few minutes too.
He's just like somebody you might just know.
Oh yeah.
Talking about genuine.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I did get a kick out of that because, and it's funny because you listen to Jesse Coots, and Jesse would not agree with what I shoot, and then I listened to your podcast, and you're reflecting on some of your favorite hunts, and they weren't there wasn't a lot of bone brought home there,
right.
It was just a great hunt, and I look at my hunt this year, like on opening day, and I shoot one. He's a 1.5-year-old buck, not that big a buck. But, I remember telling you that I've hunted that spot for years.
You never shared the story of that opening day.
What about it?
I never had you on here to share your story of your opening day buck.
Oh, and oh God, did I see deer that day. But I got in a tree stand, and it was god-awful cold. So I packed in. I even had my insulated coveralls rolled up on my pack. I packed everything up there. And I'm not a spring chicken, so it's a bit of a workout to get up to where I was going. So I get up.
You were floating through the woods like an autumn fog.
It was like a fog. I just drifted in. So that's the way I tend to overtake the woods. But so I get to my stand, and then I took off all my sweaty clothes and got dressed and everything. And I get up, and it was cold that day. But I sat there, never got out of the stand, sat there the whole time, I think from, 6:30 in the morning by the time I got in there till I think I killed that deer around 2:30 or so.
Wow, that's great.
So where this stand is, Todd, it's on the westward facing slope of the back of the mountain that we
call it the muskmelon because it's like a big muskmelon. And I'm on the back side. The sun doesn't come up there at about 1:30, 1:45.
Yeah.
So it's a cold morning over there.
It was
you don't get any
out.
morning
Nothing.
sun.
There, right. I can see the sun shining on the other hill and everything. But anyways, I think I shot the 18th deer I saw that day up in those hemlocks.
Wow.
And something just moved me when I saw it. I'm like, it's time, And I had passed like multiple other little deer and bucks, but it was like, okay, it's time. I've been here and so I was cool with that, and I have like great memories of that. And it's funny because I don't like the same day Uncle Tim killed Hercules.
Right.
And
was that opening day?
Oh no, that was the next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but the point is, I don't get too caught up in that. It was just a great hunt. I just had deer nonstop moving through the area, and it's do I keep waiting or not? And then when you have one at 10 yards, it's almost a shame to shoot them that close. But it was just a great hunt, and the deer. The deer were plentiful that day, and it got to that point. I'm like, it's all right.
And that's the only deer you got all year. You had a really rough season as far as time to get out.
Family commitments and some health things with our parents, and so it was like, well, I'm going to close this now and be done. With the funny thing, you hear about if you pass, a lot of times something else will come up. The next day, I hunt. So I'm hunting in the hemlocks there on the side hill, and I usually hunt there one day a year. And that's opening day. Other than that, I stay out of there. There's no scent. That stand stays there. Everything's good. Great spot, right? Even though I've only killed one deer there, I've seen a ton of really cool stuff. So the second day, I go up on the mountain, and I go back in and I hunt the center of the hill. And I'm sitting there, and I've been there about an hour and a half, and I see this deer coming, and I get the binoculars on it, and it's a nice buck. And the buck keeps coming and keeps coming. I'm like, son of a gun. Beautiful 8-pointer. Walks right into me. He's hanging out in the pine tree I'm in, goes right around behind me. Then he wanders off, and I'm like, well, geez, I guess I could have had him. And then, like 45 minutes later, I catch movement off to my right, and coming across the hill, I see a deer coming. I look, and it's a bigger one.
Oh, my gosh. That's cool.
And he walked right across it from me. I've heard you talk about the saddles. There's a little bit, for some reason, they crossed there.
Oh, big time.
They came from two different directions and crossed right in that spot. But I ended up, in the course of less than an hour, I saw two, nice bucks. I mean, if you were really going to let them get big, you'd let those two go. But I think my brother Tim shot the one and Jimmy shot the other. I recognized the bucks because I had him right in close. But it was it was a great hunt. But I do think that it's really cool to shoot the big bucks. And if that's what you're into, that's great. And I remember my father was like, I was shooting these big deer. My father never shot a really big deer. He shoot a nice 1.5 years or 2.5. 8 points, but he never shot that big buck, And he got to a point like towards the end of his hunting where he was passing deer. He wasn't shooting, and he's waiting for that big buck. And I'm like, Dad, it may never happen. Shoot yourself a buck. You like eating a little venison. You enjoy taking your whitetails. And I go, you're holding out for a trophy buck. And I go, I'm telling you, just kill a buck. And so he goes, I'm going to do that. And he went out and sat up on the hill and killed a buck that day. And he goes, that felt good,
Yeah.
So it's
was that the one he shot with his pistol? Or,
no,
that was his last buck that he.
Yeah.
Or his last deer was the one he.
Well,
shot
I used to sit in the blind. Remember my blind in the valley where I killed all the big bucks. Mm-hmm. So I'd sit in that blind, and I could look up the top, and there's a little bit of a bowl up there. We call it the 5 points, where all the logging roads go together. And I would sit there, and I could see deer moving back and forth all day long on the rim of that bowl. It's too far to shoot. It's the top of the mountain. So I told Dad, I said, why don't you? I said, go up there above me, all the way up above, and get on that bowl and just tuck yourself into a down oak top up there or something. And so he did, and about 2 hours later, I hear a shot, and then he comes down with that deer. So he's like, yeah, you were right. He goes, they're running back and forth through there. I just waited for a buck and got him. But I think there's a lot of joy that comes out of harvesting a deer that, I guess, we talked about what lens you see things through.
Yeah.
And I think that it depends on what lens, what are you after, right? Mm-hmm. And, I know if I shoot that little buck, he's not going to be a big one for you guys a couple years from now, but it's like, I like putting a little venison on the table, and I like the moment. I can still picture it, the moment of everything that happened there. And the fact that I was every deer that has ever come in this way, there's a great big oak tree right to my right, and I'm sitting in a ladder stand looking up this draw into the hemlocks, right at the edge where the hemlocks turn to the oaks. And there's kind of that transitional zone. And there's a huge oak tree and there's a trail, and I haven't moved because I'm well concealed, but every deer that comes down that trail, and I've had some nice bucks come down, but I can never get a shot at them. It's just dirt because it's out of the hemlocks and you don't hear any leaves crunching, and all of a sudden, bam, they're there. Yep. So I'm sitting there, and it's colder than you know what, and I'm in that stand, and all of a sudden I heard something immediately to my right. I go, there's a deer coming down that trail. So I immediately knew, and I had my rifle hanging on the tree next to me, so I'm like reaching for the rifle, and by the time I put my hand on the rifle, there's a doe standing right in front of me. And then I still hear something. So then I look a little bit past the rifle. On this side of the tree, there's a buck. So he's pushing her, and so she's looking at me. Now I guess I had the gun off the tree, so I'm holding it out like this. Now, I've been sitting here for 8.5 hours in the sub-zero weather, right? So, and then I'm starting to maybe shake a little bit. And I'm like, I got to keep this gun moving, so I'm trying to move it slow. She decides she doesn't like it, blows, takes off up the hill, up through the hemlocks. He doesn't know why, right? So he loops around the big oak tree that's to my right and pops out right in front of me. Now I got the gun in my hands, but he's like right in front of me, and he knows something's up, but he doesn't know where to go. Yeah. And he starts to run up a little bit, and then he hooks and comes back down and pops out. He's right, whatever, archery shot. And so I shot him through the heart, but it was like I can still remember that whole thing unfolding and all the, it's not just the moment where I took that deer, it's the other 17 that were involved, and it was my day, and it was the suck, right? That it was, that's what we remember the most is the adversity and how hard it was. And it's like, I'm like almost 60 years old, and I still got in there early, went up the side of that mountain, toughed it out, and came off the hill with a buck. So
it's an incredible story, and I think that the long form of having conversations like this and hearing that story and having that in your mind, and for me to be able to hear you tell that story, those are the stories that are so important that if you were to just show me a picture of the deer you shot this year, I could never capture all that by looking at a picture. You know what I mean? Right. You know it. Right. And there's that huge amount of value and just, just because you know the story behind it,
right?
Because you lived and be able to have the conversation.
But they have memories right here.
The memories in your head, right? Exactly. And then being able to tell that story to other people, to your friends. We're just sitting here in the hotel. I'm listening to that story, and I'm like, wow, that's great.
And it wasn't a slammer,
It doesn't need to be.
No.
8 hours in a tree, cold weather.
Yeah.
You know what that's worth, and enjoying that day, seeing all those deer, and then just knowing when it's time. It's.
One of the most profound things I saw that day was I had a group of 4 or 5 doe came across from below me. They must have crossed the valley, and they were coming up towards me. And the one doe, the older, mature doe, the other ones kind of worked up in, then they angled and went across the hill up and away to my left. And there was the one mature doe kept coming, and I'm watching her, and I'm like, she's kind of on my track from where I hiked in here. There's a specific path that I always take. It's not a path, but a route that I take to get in there. And she stopped at this one tree, and she was extremely taken with this tree and very riveted to it, and working with her nose and her tongue and everything around this sapling. And I'm watching her, and she's not far away. She's only 30 yards away, and I'm watching her, and I'm like, what is it with that tree that has her attention? And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, I remembered coming up. It's quite steep up in there, and I did not have a glove on because I was going in early in the morning, and I'm like, I remember I grabbed that tree.
And she could smell that.
And pulled my way up there. And this is like, 6-7 hours later on that cold day, and she was like very intent on that. And then she's looking around like, not super alert, but she was like, I don't like this, But it was just neat to watch that, to see that. And the fact that you can touch, an oak sapling or beech sapling or whatever it was, right? And then like 5-6 hours later, a deer comes along and said, something's not right here with that.
It says a lot about their senses that
Doesn't it, though?
makes me admire them so much. Like that among many other things.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool.
But that was a cool moment.
Yeah, that is a cool moment.
And that's, I think, just kind of the whole shooting a buck. It doesn't. It's the memory. It's the story. And Jimmy keeps saying it. If something walks by me and it just speaks to me and it's ready to shoot,
that's right.
I'm going to shoot it.
Yeah.
And I've been on a personal journey that I really want to shoot a big mature buck. And I'm each year I'm stepping it up a little bit. I'm getting a little bit bigger. And that buck that I shot this year with my gun, I didn't. And the same thing with both my gun bucks, my one in PA and my one here in New York. I was to the point where I was ready. Like as soon as I saw that deer, I saw its body, I saw the beams on it. I didn't know if it was just a big 6-pointer or an 8-pointer. I had no clue. So when I walked up to that deer, I'm like, oh my God, it's a nice buck.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm like, this thing could be 100 inches. It could be 180 inches. I don't even know what I just shot. But like that night when I shot those 3 deer, like I was so fired up. Like it hit me. I was in the mood. I was going to put meat in the freezer and it just happens, and that conversation I had with Jesse, what I enjoyed digging into with him is that there's more to just that buck. It's the game for him. And
right.
Everybody has
the game.
Everybody has a game. It's what's your end game? What are you trying to achieve?
Yep.
And that's what I like about getting all these different types of people on here, because some people are like, oh, I don't like Jesse's message. It's like, you're not listening to Jesse's message.
Yep.
Jesse's message is he has a goal. He has a caliber that he's after. And he doesn't care what your caliber is.
Right.
But don't complain when you're not shooting his caliber if you're not going to put that type of work in to get what he's getting.
Right.
But if you're going for the experience and the memory and the story of what you endured and what happened and how that deer made it to your table, like that's what you're focused on.
Yep.
So that's the beauty of all this. As long as we're all doing it legally by the books with a bigger
Right.
picture in mind and doing it the right way, like everybody can hunt their hunt. Like
Right.
go do your thing.
Well, that's why and I need to thank you, Todd, for that podcast, because it was
like right after the one I did with Jesse, I think, or right around the same time.
right before it. That I had heard it, but just a reflection back on some small bucks. But I mean, just verbally telling the story again. It wasn't the buck; it was a story you told on each one. I can almost remember the story in each one, and the fact that that's cemented in your mind, and it's just the way the story I just shared is cemented in mind. But it's just how special those 3 were, and they were nothing, no big set of horns to go home and brag about.
Yeah.
But it was the experience.
It's the experience, and it's hunting your hunt.
Right.
Just like you just said,
Exactly.
Billy. It's like that's how you boil it down. It's hunt
Yep.
your hunt. Yeah, enjoy it and embrace it for what it's worth.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. So trying to start wrapping this up and swinging back to you, Todd. As far as the journey you've gone on, now you've got this new podcast and what you're doing with Modern Carnivore. How is the food side speaking to you when you see that being such a huge piece of kind of wrapping everything of what we're talking about? Our last show we just posted was about processing the meat in that end game. Like, where do you see the food aspect, and where does Modern Carnivore see the food aspect as far as helping grow hunters and getting people involved in the outdoors?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Billy. And when you look at new hunters that are interested, so let's just look at folks that might be interested in reconnecting to hunting, or maybe they've never hunted before, but they've got their curiosity piqued. The food angle is a really important piece of that puzzle, because it's usually something like, hey, I'm interested in having a real connection to my food. I've been buying my food from Wegmans or wherever, and I realized that maybe I just want to have a better, honest connection to that. Maybe I just want to use that, and it goes into like having that outdoor experience and how everything kind of comes together. But the food, I think, is really important because it sparks the curiosity for a lot of people, And then it's also such an amazing conduit for sharing stories. So what better way can you talk about these kinds of stories other than podcasting like we're doing, but sitting at the dinner table, eating a great meal where people are like, this is amazing. And then you can tell the story about how and where that animal lived and what it takes to keep them on the ground. So, I think the food aspect is really pretty cool. It seems to speak to people. When you talk to people even that don't hunt, if you frame that message or that conversation in terms of why it's important to me or you, Bill, to like hunt, in terms of like, hey, one of the aspects of that that's really important is because I want to have a personal responsibility with my food. I want to take responsibility for it, and in doing so, I can be an active participant in nature, and I can really just find my own humanity. And so I think that even for most people that don't hunt, if they hear that, they're not gonna argue with that. There's gonna be some people that are just not gonna eat meat regardless of anything, right? And there's always gonna be that really small percentage that are just gonna get pissed off about it, that you eat meat or I eat meat. But I think the vast majority that hold our social license and privilege for hunting will understand, like if you look at numbers and studies and say, okay, where does society approve of hunting? Under what conditions? Because it's conditional upon certain things. If you're hunting for food and you're hunting to connect to that, social acceptance of that is pretty high right now. It's like 80%. Yeah. So that's good.
It's kind of a different day in that respect.
Yeah,
than what it was 10, 15 years ago.
Than what it was 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah, exactly. So, is that the only reason people hunt? I think that it's deeper than that. Like, I don't think it can be, like, I know, like, if I had to really be honest and say, why do I hunt? The food is really important. But, like, the reality is we live in a modern world. I don't have to have that food, but I want to. And so that goes into deeper things about how I see the world and my place in it. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's great conversation.
Yeah, people will tell you if you go turkey hunting or something, or you're out deer hunting, they're like, for what you spend on that, you could go to Wegmans and just get, it's like that's
you can have that.
There's almost something primal that draws you to it.
There's something primal that draws you to it, and it goes back. And can I circle back around to like your
chase
quote?
That rabbit back to the
Okay,
hole.
so I'm barking like a beagle right now, and I'm coming back around. But I'm going to say that, we were talking about parents and getting your kids outdoors and like what the relationship was with my father. And I'll say that, I don't know who I'd be if I didn't have those outdoor experiences with my dad. Like, I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast, but my parents divorced when I was a kid. So I was probably 6 or 7 years old when my parents divorced. And they all lived up there in the North Country. Like, my dad lived over in North Creek, and my mom and stepdad lived in Chestertown. Both of them have been remarried for the better part of 40 years. So what I've known as family has been my dad and stepmom on the one hand, and my mom and stepfather on the other. Mm-hmm. And I'll say that, like, my mom and stepfather, I lived with them, and they taught me to strive to be a good person. They taught me how to work. They took care of me. They put food on the table. They're wonderful parents. My dad always took time to take me hunting and fishing. Like, I would go there on weekends, and we would carry that old John boat for miles. We would hunt. I know it wasn't convenient for him to do all that stuff. I don't think he had any clue when he was doing that stuff when I was a kid that we'd be having these kinds of conversations that we're having. I think he liked to hunt and fish. Yeah. And I think that his enthusiasm for it spilled over to me because, like, he was enjoying it. It's like the gift that keeps on giving, right? Because I enjoy it too. And, like, I think about that as being a dad with my daughter and, like, how excited I am to share that with her. And, like, I have no clue about, like, what that's going to mean for her life. But, like, we're having fun, and we're trying to get her outdoors. And if it can be an influence, and, like, if she can look back at that and say, I enjoyed those memories with my dad, regardless of whether she hunts or not, like, I hope it makes her a better person.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what it leads to as far as her pursuit of wildlife or anything. It's just take the moment, enjoy it, cherish it. It will make her a better person.
Yeah.
And it helps to shape and mold.
And that's what you hope for your kids, right?
Right.
I mean, you hope
I don't care if you hunt.
Right.
I really don't. I love you either way, But,
yeah. If we can have fun doing it, it's great. But like, if she never hunts, I'm not going to worry about it. But I think that, like, just, trying to love your kids and have formative experiences. And those experiences go beyond hunting too, right? We do a lot of things with our kids. Yeah. We camp, we watch TV. but it's just one more thing that we can do to connect with them. And in a world that's like so different than when I grew up. I mean, when I grew up, we used to play with pine cones, and we used to like run around and like get home for dinner. And I'd say that's not like I grew up in the 50s, but it was still, you know.
That's how it was when I was.
It was still pretty freewheeling.
You would take Jimmy and I up to Naples with you every single weekend.
Yep.
And Jimmy was working, and I'd be off in the woods throwing rocks against trees and picking rocks up and hitting them. You know, like that's what I remember as a kid. We had our entertainment in front of us and stuff, but 100% that was a huge impact on who Jimmy and I became as far as just who we are, was just the work ethic and the just being out in those situations. You know, and I want to do that so bad with Billy, where, you know, people always said that I was, you know, Billy was like, he's like way older than his age. You know, I'd be like young and like having conversations with adults at like.
Well, you'd be concerned about the weather. You know, he was like a little man. He'd be like, "You see, we got a storm coming," you know, because he was always hanging with me. And
I want the same thing for my kids, and I want Billy to be with me and experience that stuff. And the same thing with my daughter that'll be here in May. Like, I want them to be involved with things. Don't, you know, say, oh, well, the kids will be with the kids and the adults will be with the adults. It's like, no. I think that's a big reason why Jimmy and I are the way we are. Is because you were so inclusive of us to be doing the same things that you were doing.
You two have a natural, I mean, your father and son, but like, I really enjoy like just watching this conversation. Like, your conversation is like so natural, and like you understand each other, and you know, there's a comfort level there that transcends just that parent-child relationship. It's because you've done all that together, you know.
Just a lot of time together.
Yeah.
I was Billy talked about transitionally, like my hunting career, if you will, or how I was bringing home the big bucks and getting in the books and everything. And then, but you boys got to a point where I made a very conscious decision that it's the most important thing I do is get these kids out hunting with me. You know, if I leave them home, I got a chance I can get back into backcountry. I get myself a good one, right? But then what they'll remember is Dad left them home, right? So I took them with me. And Joel, our buddy, my best friend Joel, would take, I had two of them, and they were very close in age, so he'd take one, I'd take the other. So they got out and did a lot of hunting, or with us when we did a lot of hunting. But the very first time I took you boys bow hunting, you probably don't even remember it, but I had bought little camouflage coverall suits for them. And your mother went too. All four of us went up to the cabin. We told Mom, you wait here. We're going to just go up and sit by the south tree stand on the fence row. There was a tree that had tipped over. And it was like not a huge tree, but it had like 3 trunks. So it made like, inside the trunks, I'm like, I'll get in there. And I scraped out all the leaves, so it was just dirt. It was archery hunting. And it was a nice day. I thought it'd be a nice day to take the boys hunting. So I got you guys by the hand and went up we go. You were young. I had Tootsie Rolls and little Matchbox bulldozers and dump trucks. So I had set you guys up in there, and like we just sit here and you guys, you know, so they're playing in the dirt, and you guys, everything was going great. We saw a fox. I don't know if you remember that, but a fox came by. You guys got the biggest kick out of that. And then all of a sudden it starts getting on, you know, towards dusk, and I see a deer coming, and it's a buck, and he's coming right to us. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember.
I remember this whole hunt. Yeah.
So, but so I'm looking at this a little like a fork horn. I'm like, how cool would this be to shoot this buck with these two? You had to be like 5 and 6, or maybe 6 and 7 at the most. And so this deer's coming across. He's going to walk right across the end of the treetop that we're in. So it's, you know, 15, 20-yard shot. And so I'm like, this tree is providing me perfect natural cover. So I'm quiet, boy. Shh, don't, you know. So I get on a knee. I knock an arrow. The deer keeps coming. I'm like, he's going to walk right across the end of the tree. And I'm sitting here with these 2 little kids. And so when he got into like the treetop, I stood up. And I'm like coming to full draw, and then I feel a tug at my pants. It's like, psst, Dad. Psst, Dad. I was like, quiet. So I'm like, now I'm at full draw. I'm like, quiet. Psst, Dad. I'm like, dude. So finally, and the deer's like, what is that noise coming out of the tree? The deer's frozen looking like at me, and I'm at full draw. And you're still tugging at my trousers and going, psst, Dad, don't shoot. So I'm like, so I finally I couldn't hold it. I had to let down. I let down. I go, what? And he's like, wouldn't you rather shoot that one? And there was a great. You remember that? There was a great.
Are
Big
you
buck.
serious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I didn't see it because I was so riveted on this one. But this buck was a really nice big buck.
Yeah.
And it had come in, and he's like, "Wouldn't you?" And I'm like, "What, Billy?" He goes, "Wouldn't you rather shoot that one?" We ended up getting neither one, but we had a great story.
yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah, there was deer all over on us that
Yeah.
night. I remember
Yeah.
that. We couldn't have been 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah,
maybe.
you were little.
Yeah.
But it's, and then both of you were with me. You were 9 years old, each of you, when we harvested our first deer together. So, and I remember you were hell bent. You were going to carry the backpack back. It was Thanksgiving Day. I think we had pretty deep snow. And I put the backpack on. I'm like, it's too heavy for you, Billy. No, I'll be fine. So you stood up, and I put the backpack on you. And when I let go of it, you just flipped over
tipped
backwards.
over backwards.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll drag the deer and take this. But
Yeah.
that's
really
good
funny.
stuff. And that's what I would encourage anybody to do. And I look forward to you taking your son out, but I also look forward to taking him out too. I'll get to kind of relive some of that and form those memories, just like Grandpa did with you.
Yeah, 100%. That's what
Yeah,
it's all
good
about.
stuff.
And I'll put a plug in for mentorship and just say quickly, like this is my last comment, but I'll say that like I feel so incredibly fortunate to have a family and have a dad and uncles that took me hunting.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that so many people don't have that opportunity. And so it's so important, like when we're sharing these stories, like I get goosebumps listening to your stories, talking about that last story, because it relates so well, and it's such a great one that if their listeners are out there and somebody approaches you, or you can reach out to somebody that didn't have those experiences, but that as an adult wants to try it, just take them out, and because they'll, whether they're 5 or not, doesn't matter. Like just sharing that experience with people, they'll remember it.
Regardless of age, that experience has tremendous qualities.
That first experience is
it's just there's nothing like it.
Yep. So take somebody
well
hunting.
said, Todd.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
Man, this is great. I could sit here with you two and just freaking tell stories.
Order a pizza and we'll keep going.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll go down to the
We're
front
going
desk.
for the Guinness Book of World Record, longest podcast.
That's right.
Nah, we don't
We'll
have a
give Joe
chance.
Rogan
No,
a run for his
I
money.
know.
Yeah, I was listening to a Jocko podcast on the way here. It was like 4.5 hours
my
long. It's
gosh.
Like an audio book.
It's ridiculous, but so we'll wrap this up. Todd, I really appreciate you coming down here and meeting with us, and I'm sure we'll be getting together again and doing more of this, and wish you luck and best with everything with your new endeavor with Modern Carnivore, and we're just gonna keep feeding them. And
Yeah, congratulations on that. Very happy for you. It's
Thanks a
great
lot.
to see that growing, and I know I can tell from listening to you talk today, but also listening to some of your podcasting work, from about the episodes you did with that work and how it fulfilled you, or you were very passionate about it.
the field.
That was very
program.
telling to me. So it doesn't surprise me you would move in the direction to help continue to build and promote that.
Yeah, thanks
It's
so
awesome
much,
stuff.
Bill. I appreciate it. I feel like I landed in such a good spot with that. And I just want to shout out to Mark Norquist at ModCarn, because he has an incredible amount of vision and passion. And he was starting to do that stuff several years ago before a lot of people had gotten to that point. And I am lucky. I'm a lucky dude to be able to call him a friend.
Well, there's luck, and
awesome.
you also,
Yeah.
you're doing what you're practicing what you preach, and I think there's a lot of people that can do a lot of this, but they don't back it up, and you're out there doing it and volunteering and doing what you're saying you're doing. So that's the message that we'll end with today, is that get out there and help somebody, get out there and do it yourself,
Mentor somebody new.
somebody,
Yeah.
Take your kid outside,
Your
and play
family,
in the
a
snow,
friend.
yeah,
Coworker.
just live it up, get outside and
right.
do something. So
Thanks for having me on.
all right, thank you, Todd.
Thanks for
Appreciate
coming.
it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.